Hello and welcome to the radiotimes.com Doctor Who podcast. My name's Huw Fullerton.
My name is Morgan Jeffrey.
And this week we're doing a surprise sequel. We didn't announce this last week, but last week we talked a bit about how the coronavirus pandemic might affect the next series of Doctor Who with regards to filming and things like that. And kind of spinning off from that and a few other things that we've seen, we kind of wanted to talk about whether, we could be in for a bit of a format change with Doctor Who. I don't know if, Morgan, you kind of want to explain what I mean by that.
Yeah, well, I first saw this idea mooted on Twitter by Max C. Curtis on Twitter, who was suggesting that maybe in future Doctor Who should look to its past and revert to the sort of 25 to 30-minute episode length, which I think is interesting. I think potentially there's scope for it. I quite like the idea, especially as someone with short attention span. I'm all for shorter running times. What do you think about it?
I'm kind of curious about it because it works so well for so many of the BBC Three things we've seen, like I May Destroy You and Normal People. I mean, I know there's a very different show to Doctor Who, but, I think it definitely is, it's a nice length. I quite enjoy watching things that are half an hour long. Like Inside Number 9 is a great example, actually, compared to Doctor Who, because that's a show where they create a whole world, and new characters within half an hour and then tell a full story. And I'm always really impressed that they managed to do that within 30 minutes. The one thing I would say is, like, Doctor Who, it sometimes feels difficult enough for them to kind of tell the whole story of Doctor Who in 45 or 50 minutes, because you have to establish new characters, you have to set up a new world or a new planet or whatever, and then also have a story with a beginning, middle, and end. It's kind of like a movie, but in, about at worst, a movie would be, an hour and 30 minutes, or at best, if in some ways. I love a 90-minute film, but Doctor Who is obviously half that, or more or less. So it's kind of already on the back foot. But, I mean, maybe we could be in for, as you say, more like the classic series, more multi-part stories in that case. You could have half-hour episodes, but, off the top of my head, each story is 3 episodes. Like, I know that's shorter than they used to, but, you could do that.
Or even, if Doctor Who will have to abide by social distancing guidelines going forward. So as we were discussing in last week, it's going to take longer to produce the show, which means it's going to be more expensive to produce. So rather than 10 45-minute episodes, why not produce 12 30-minute episodes, which is the equivalent of, say, like 6 hours of TV? And then you could even do that. You could go one step further to what you were suggesting. You could even do it as one epic 12-part story with cliffhangers between episodes, like they used to do, like the old days.
More serialized, basically.
Yeah, like one serialized story, almost like Torchwood Children of Earth writ large. And that way, again, issues we were discussing last time, things like Doctor Who always brings in new guest cast, which makes it very, with each new story, which makes it difficult to quarantine. It has so many different sets and locations. Every episode has a new set, a new location, or several. Whereas this way, if you had one epic story made up of shorter installments, you could have a recurring cast, you could have recurring sets throughout an entire series, which eliminates that difficulty.
And then also you could kind of, the filming blocks, Doctor Who usually films in kind of blocks of episodes. It could be easier to kind of isolate those. I say, all the scenes with the TARDIS team and this set of characters, which would be spread out over the series, are done at once. So they can be like isolated together and kind of film those. And then it can be all the scenes with this villain character and this character all together. And I think it's quite interesting. I think definitely, based on what we've said before, Doctor Who sort of has some advantages in terms of, it does have a production base and things like that, but it has a few big disadvantages compared to other shows because it's so standalone every week and it changes so much. So it's not such an isolated group of people. If you started to have more multi-part episodes and so more returning cast, Doctor Who has traditionally had multi-part episodes. Like, it's not out of the question. Like, it wasn't necessarily a massive, degradation in storytelling for them to do that. In some ways, it's more traditional for what Doctor Who used to be. And then you maybe be able to sidestep a few things. I actually think, it could be quite interesting, I mean, it's sort of invention born out of necessity, but it could lead to some good invention, like some kind of slightly different storytelling than we've been seeing. The flip side of that is looking at what Chris Chibnall, the, boss of Doctor Who, did with Jodie Whittaker's first series, and even with the second series, like, he definitely kind of seemed to shy away a bit from that serialization. Like, there were definitely more elements of it in series 12, but also there were a lot of standalone episodes. Like Praxius doesn't massively follow on from Fugitive of the Judoon, other than that there's a bit of a cliffhanger at the end of Fugitive of the Judoon that leads into it. Practice pretty
Mm.
much stands alone, and so do the next couple of episodes. Like the Jodie Whittaker era, I'd say has been characterized by being, if anything, more standalone. So I do wonder if that would be a betrayal of the Chris Chibnall vision. Do you know what I mean?
The ethos. But that being said, we've talked before about how dramatically different Series 12 is to Series 11 in terms of Series 11 being very continuity light, no recurring monsters or characters to speak of, and then Series 12 you've got Cybermen and the Master and Captain Jack, so that's a huge departure. So again, if this were to be a change, required by necessity, it could actually give us again a big change in the Jodie Whittaker, Chris Chibnall era. That, as you say, it could be quite an exciting reinvention. And it's interesting as well thinking about episode length with Doctor Who, because although the classic series had dabbled in the 45-minute format here and there, it was only really in 2005 with the Russell T Davies era where that 45-minute length became the norm, because really the only dramas that were it was quite common in the 1960s and 1970s when Doctor Who started to have 30-minute dramas. But by the time 2005 rolls around, the only dramas that are that length are soaps or children's dramas. And I think for Doctor Who to because it was a question at the time, would it go back to the old episode length and format? But to establish itself as a serious player in the drama world, Doctor Who really had to go the 45-minute route. But as you've already flagged, now we are very much seeing a resurgence of the 30-minute drama format with everything. You see things like The Mandalorian, which has a slightly shorter episodes if you're talking sci-fi, although that does have the benefit of being on a streaming service, so it can vary in length. Like I think the finale, like some episodes are 30 minutes, and
but Doctor Who episodes vary in length now. Do you know what I mean? Like that's
true.
That changes all the time.
And we have seen, as you said, shows on the BBC like Normal People recently, and I May Destroy You, which do fit the 30-minute format, and that was kind of what made me think. Both of those are 12-parters, and they follow more or less one consistent narrative, which is what made me think that Doctor Who could go that route.
Yeah, I mean, they could even do what they do with a lot of those shows and kind of air them on TV, kind of in little back-to-back, double episodes, because that could be quite fun. Like, so then they technically are standalones, but also kind of make for the full hour. I mean, weirdly, the more we talk about it, I'm sort of like 45 minutes is quite an odd length for a show, isn't it? I mean, it's 50 now, but I mean, it works pretty well with translating over in America, because obviously it means that they can do ad breaks and things like that. But I mean, usually in the UK, it's kind of like stuff's an hour, right? Like there are things that are 45 minutes. Obviously, even shorter. We have Staged on the BBC at the moment with some ex-Doctor Who people like David Tennant and Michael Sheen, and that is 15-minute bursts. But I do feel like 45 minutes was done for a very specific reason, and as we've seen in 2018 when they brought it back with Jodie Whittaker, they did slightly alter it. They made the episodes ever so slightly longer, which I thought was quite interesting, because it's a very, very small change, but I guess you can do quite a lot in 5 minutes. But yeah, if there's no particular reason for the episodes to be 45 minutes, it's just that the way that they are, like they could be an hour long, presumably, like they, they have enough footage, they can just make things a little longer.
They have been, so
yeah, exactly.
They have been. Timeless Children was slightly longer, and Staged is interesting because that is a show very much born out of necessity, born out of the lockdown, and it feels like in the situation that we're finding ourselves in when TV writers and producers and creative teams are facing all these obstacles and these new challenges, the old rules of what how long shows should be and what is a traditional length for something, they kind of been thrown out the window a little bit. Like you wouldn't have seen a 15-minute show on BBC One in any slot pre-lockdown, I don't think. Whereas now Staged has happened, and it's terrific, and it's been quite a big hit. So again, there's no given all the obstacles and challenges that Doctor Who particularly is facing as a very difficult show to make at the best of times, and now it's facing all these new challenges. I don't think you can rule out it undergoing some serious format changes. Definitely.
And I think the best way to see it is not as in like, oh, Doctor Who's going to be ruined by this, but maybe as in, what opportunities are there? What cool things could be done out of this? Think big. Like what about the way we tell Doctor Who stories could change? I mean, the thing I first thought of, which has been sort of rumoured online, some people have sort of been theorising about this, is just that the next series could be the same episode length, but just shorter. You know, instead of 10 episodes, we get maybe 5 or 6. And you mentioned this in the last podcast. And there's been some whispers about that online. I did ask the BBC, and they said no plans about any of that yet. So, you know, we'll see. But I do think it's quite an interesting point, because Doctor Who has such a long shoot. This is something we didn't touch on last week. Doctor Who is like a 9-month shoot, which is like unheard of. Like no TV show shoots that long, except maybe something like EastEnders, which is basically shooting all the time, you know, in the absence of pandemics. So with regards to like how Doctor Who Series 13 is going to work, are you going to really convince, you know, Jodie Whittaker, Mandip Gill, Bradley Walsh and Tosin Cole, if they're still in it, you know, whoever the cast are, to basically isolate together for nearly a year? Like, that's not going to happen. Like, it's not, they're not going to do that. That's not fair. And like, they wouldn't be able to ask them probably. So then you kind of think, so what could they do? Could they cut the series in half? But then even then, you know, it's still going to take a longer time to shoot than normal. And then you sort of think, you know, they've already got this one special. Maybe the answer is they haven't like officially said what Series 13 is going to be. Maybe it could be more like David Tennant's last year, you know, a few big specials where you kind of basically have these blocks of shooting where they'll do like, they've already got the one special in the bag. They could do, you know, a special for Easter or something, and then do maybe one for, you know, the summer, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's not ideal, but maybe that is more realistic, you know, and maybe that could be a way of kind of keeping the show alive during this time up to a point where they can shoot more normally and do a proper series again.
And we all remember how good the last Easter special was. No,
I quite like it. Maybe we should do an episode about Planet of the Dead. I have a soft spot for it because I like that they did an Easter special. Although they definitely should have made more of the whole Easter changing all the time. That feels like it's made for Doctor Who, the whole why does Easter shift all the time?
But no, I think you're right. I think one of the great things about Doctor Who is that change is inherent in its format. It's one of those, you know, the only constant in Doctor Who is change. And that, of course, applies to the lead actor and sort of the style and tone of the show, and the cast and creative teams. But it also applies to the format, as we said. You know, even the classic series didn't always stick with the 25-minute format. You had again for reasons of necessity. In 1984, the Winter Olympics meant that Resurrection of the Daleks from the Peter Davison era got cut into 45-minute episodes, 45 minutes as opposed to 4 25s. And then season 22, the first Colin Baker series, that also went for a 45-minute format before then reverting to 25 minutes. So Doctor Who has always toyed with these things, as we were talking about last time. You know, we've had years without series where the shows only put out specials, and actually maybe again that's what the show needs right now, is to restore that sense of novelty a little bit by you know, make people kind of, you know, take notice and pay attention to Doctor Who again by switching up the format and doing something quite radical and dramatic.
Yeah, it could be interesting. I mean, it might depend a little on how people react to, you know, this festive special that we've got coming up. The extent to which, like, is that going to be a big bit of event TV? Partly because, you know, there won't maybe be as much on at Christmas as there normally would be. Although by then, you know, they might have managed to film a few other things by that stage, because we're still very far ahead. Doctor Who really did its homework on getting ahead for that Christmas special. And yeah, I guess you just got to think, you know, what's more important, because we were already looking at a bit of not a delay exactly, but quite a big gap between the most recent series and the next series. And now obviously that's probably going to be longer because there was a gap in filming anyway, and now everything's just going to take longer and maybe be delayed. And you have to think, you know, is it more important to get a full series of Doctor Who later, or is it more important to have some Doctor Who now? And actually, I don't think there's an easy answer on that. I don't think necessarily saying, oh, you got to wait because it would be better quality, which we have said before. That's obviously a fair enough point to make, but I do also feel like there's a risk there of, if you kind of just don't make Doctor Who, you kind of get into the habit of not making Doctor Who, which I don't think people want. And you kind of do want the show to kind of stay alive and kind of have a life on TV, even if it is just in small increments.
And Doctor Who, the classic series, was never cancelled officially. You know, no one ever came out and said we've stopped making Doctor Who. They just stopped making it. So you know, it is a possibility that if it's more a US television thing where they outright cancel shows.
Yeah, it's a big thing.
Often BBC dramas will just sort of stop coming back. And as much as it is an iconic show, there's nothing to say that Doctor Who will stop coming. You know, will stop coming back, won't stop coming back. But what I'm trying to say is there's nothing to say that Doctor Who production couldn't suddenly just stop. That you know, one series could just suddenly be the last.
Definitely. I mean, it could be that. I mean, who knows what kind of world we're going into with coronavirus, the new normal, all that. I mean, maybe Doctor Who in the form as we currently know it will just be impossible to make forever. Like,
Mm.
you know, I mean, that might sound a bit drastic, but, you know, maybe the version of Doctor Who which has, you know, loads of makeup and prosthetics and, you know, loads of different locations, loads of new cast every episode, you know, changing all the time. Maybe that doesn't work in this sort of world. And maybe Doctor Who would have to become a kind of lesser version of itself, do fewer episodes, or just not be on TV. You know, maybe the dramas we're going to get are going to be simpler than Doctor Who is.
Mm.
I mean,
But
who knows?
I think, yeah, no, and I think you're right in that, like this is something that's going to affect TV and film production long term, right? It's probably not going to be resolved by the end of even next year.
Yeah.
I think personally, for the reasons I was saying before, I think it is important to have some Doctor Who on in the near future, no matter what form that takes. I think that's because, as you were saying, there's the argument to be made. Oh, we should just wait until we can make 10 episodes again of 45 minutes with all the kind of polished production we've come to expect. But who knows how long it will be until we can do that. It may well be years, and that's years you don't have Doctor Who on television, and that's years that a young audience, which is who Doctor Who is ultimately really for, is going without Doctor Who, and that's a long time when you're a younger viewer to go without. Kids will forget about Doctor Who if it's not on. So I'd rather that the show does come up with some inventive means of getting it on the screen, and that may well be fewer episodes or shorter episodes.
You know what my big solution is? I've solved it for the BBC. They can expect my submission in the post. Jodie Whittaker's animated adventures, right? It's like the Infinite Quest. Do you remember that? Do you remember the Infinite Quest?
Or Dreamland. Yeah.
Dreamland, yeah. And I actually really liked Dreamland. I thought that was really good.
Yeah. Do you know what? Don't rule it out. It's another option. Like, if you wanted some kind of Doctor Who production on the BBC, why not an animated special? It's an option, right? Maybe
they go through some sort of weird process and they all get turned into animated characters, like in
that would be
Community
fun.
or something.
Yeah, that would be fun. Yeah,
because the thing with the animation is like it's oh no, we're worried about the aliens. You don't have to touch the people's faces. You can just draw them on. It's like, oh, how are we going to get this crowd in? They're not real. They're not really there. It's fine. There's no coronavirus in animation. It's fine.
And it's the kind of thing that Doctor Who, again, uniquely could probably pull off. Right?
Yeah, it wouldn't really work for Line of Duty, would it?
No, right, exactly. Doctor Who has that heightened sense of things where you could do an animated episode or a part animated episode, and it would totally work. Again, because change is so inherent in the show. If you took a show that was less established and where change was less established and tried to make tweaks, it wouldn't work as well. People wouldn't react to it as well. They would rebel against it. But because I mean, fans will always have thoughts and opinions and discussions about these things, these changes. But Doctor Who, it feeds on change so much that there really are all kinds of different options and avenues that can be explored in terms of how they get the show on TV.
Definitely. And, I mean, a good example of what you were just talking about there is the Blacklist, which is the sort of big procedural show in the US, they weren't able to finish their finale and they had to cut a few episodes out. So they decided to part animate their final episodes so they could still get something out. And the fans hated it. I think it's quite a good idea, but the fans really like it. I think part of that was the animation was, I think they used a previs company rather than proper animators because they wanted to. So it was a bit of a 2003 James Bond Nightfire kind of look to everybody. But
they look like PlayStation cutscenes. They're animated scenes. I thought that was a great idea when I heard
really
Blacklist was doing that, because and the showrunner made the argument that that show is actually quite heightened and a bit like a graphic novel. So it would work for a show like that, where it maybe wouldn't work for a more grounded drama, which is what we were also saying about Doctor Who. I think the issue there was just that they had to turn it around, those animated sequences, in too short space of time, because they had to hit a broadcast slot for their finale, and it just wasn't up to par. Whereas if Doctor Who really invested in an animated solution and it invested a lot of the money that was planned for live action, that could theoretically work out really nicely.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it might be a bit of a pipe dream because I'm sure the BBC are committed to doing it in live action and very important.
Oh, I'm sure. We're just spitballing, but yeah,
I just think it'd be fun. I think it'd be cool. I'd love to see that. And also, it would just be a fun way to do it because people can record from home. Do their voices. It'd be easy peasy. But look, I mean, we'll have to see if the BBC take up our brilliant, foolproof, definitely popular with everybody idea. I do feel like, as you say, overall, something's going to happen with Doctor Who where we're going to get fewer episodes, more limited episodes, or a really, really delayed series. I guess it's kind of, picking the best of bad situations. And I feel like maybe the best thing they can do is actually just make a virtue of it, try and do something different and be like, you know what, yeah, rather than just try and do what we normally do worse, let's think of something we wouldn't normally do, but we can do in these situations.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's the danger, isn't it? Is trying to make Doctor Who at the level of which we've come to expect it and ending up just making it less well. No, like no one wants that. So the thing to do is possibly to take a risk, because Doctor Who is a show that that allows you to do that, and potentially you could produce something that's really interesting and really exciting, like going back to the 30-minute runtime, which could really give this show a shot in the arm potentially.
So there you have it. RadioTimes.com officially calling for less Doctor Who. Shocker. They're trying to bring it down. We're saying, no, the end of the show as we know it. We're actively campaigning to reduce the amount of Doctor Who on TV.
We want as much Doctor Who as is safe to produce. That's what we want.
Exactly. We're playing it down the line. But yeah, look, I think it's definitely an interesting issue, and I really hope that we do find out some more about the future of Doctor Who in this new normal. And I'm kind of interested to see how it goes. I mean, to be honest, probably it'll just be like in 3 months, I'll just be like, oh no, we're just going to film as normal now. And it'll just be a bit delayed.
This is it. We're in such a changeable situation at the moment where it feels currently like there could be really long-term ramifications to coronavirus pandemic and the social distancing guidelines. Like I was saying earlier, it feels like it might run for years, or it could well be that cleverer minds than ours are able to come up with solutions that mean they can produce Doctor Who to the level we expect somehow under these guidelines, and all of this will be a moot point. But at the moment, it doesn't feel like we're there.
I do like as well how, I mean, I know this is a Doctor Who podcast, how our main concern about the pandemic going on for years is like, but what does this mean for Doctor Who? Shut up about the economy. I just want to know what's going on with the TARDIS.
Hey, Doctor Who makes a lot of money, and of course there are a lot of larger issues at play. But we're here to talk about Doctor Who. If they can open the pubs, they can open
the TARDIS. That's our slogan. They open the pub doors. They can open the TARDIS doors. I eagerly await the government bailout of Doctor Who. Well, listen, thank you so much to everyone who's tuned in this week. We've been carrying on with this podcast throughout lockdown and chatting about stuff, so we really appreciate everyone listening and putting your comments below, especially the ones that aren't personal abuse directed at me and Morgan. Well, there are only a few of those, and you scamps. If you want to read more of our Doctor Who content, including some stuff about all this coronavirus nonsense, there's loads of articles on radiotimes.com. We also have loads more podcasts on our YouTube channel. Sorry for anyone who's asked if they can listen to podcasts anywhere else. We don't currently have that facility. We're just doing them on YouTube in lockdown at the moment. But if enough people show interest, then we might move them onto other platforms. So please do send emails to people who aren't me about it. I would just like to say thanks again. I've been Huw Fullerton.
I've been Morgan Jeffrey.
And this has been the Radio Times Doctor Who podcast. Goodbye.